Okay, so today we're going to go over the coordinate plane, and so we want to go over some vocabulary. The coordinate plane is, this entire thing is the coordinate plane. So this is called the coordinate plane. So two number lines, you got a vertical number line and you have a horizontal number line. And when they intersect like that, this whole entire thing is called a coordinate plane. X-axis is the horizontal. That's also known as the input, what's going into the function or the machine. And the y-axis is the vertical one, and that is also known as the output, or what's coming out of the machine. And then we have the origin, or where the two axes meet. So that's your origin. And that has the coordinate 0, 0. And then you have your quadrants. So notice it's broken up into 4 pieces. So we have 4 quadrants. We have quadrant 1, we'll just say Q1 for short, Q2, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4, right? The word quadrants. So it breaks it up into 4 chunks. And notice it goes counterclockwise. And then you have a point or ordered pair. So you have a point or an ordered pair. So each of those points has an input and an output. We call it an X and a Y, right? It has an input and it has an output. An X and a Y. So what would the input output of that location be? So for that particular point, the input, if we follow it down with our eyes, we can see it has an input of 7. And if we follow it over to the output line, we can see it has an output of positive 4. So we say that point or that ordered pair has a coordinates are 7, 4. So it has an input. It has an input of positive 7, and it has an output of positive 4. So we always put the input first and the output second. Let's look at another one. Let's look at this ordered pair. This one, so what is its coordinates? So we want to look at the input and we want to look at the output. So the input is the x-axis. So we want to follow it up to see what the input is. So the input is negative 4. So this point is negative 4. And then we want to follow it over to look at the output. So the output is also negative 4. So we have an input and an output. So we have an output. The output always goes last. So the output goes last and the input always goes first. So input, output. Okay, so let's look at some more problems. So here we have where we want to decide which quadrant each point begins to. So on the first one we have an input of negative 3. So we got to go find negative 3 on the x-axis. So negative 3 on the x-axis would be right here. And then we have to find negative 2 on the y-axis. And then where those 2 points meet. So if you follow those 2 points and see where they meet, that would be the coordinate negative 3, negative 2. Right? So that would be in which quadrant? So remember, quadrant 1 is where you have positives and positives. Quadrant 2 is where you have negatives and then positive numbers. Quadrant 3 is where you have negative numbers and negative numbers. And then quadrant 4, you can see, is where you have positives, negatives. right? So this would be in quadrant 3. What about 4, -6? For 4, -6, we want to go find 4 on the input, right? So I'll put a little, maybe I'll put a little X. So we have to go find +4 on the input. And we need to find -6 on the output. So here's -6 on the output. And then it's where those two meet. So we've got a +4 for the input, and we have a -6 for the output. So that's the ordered pair, -4, -6. So it's input, output. So remember, your X's are your input, and your Y's are your output. So that would be in quadrant 3. Sorry, quadrant 4. 0, 5. 0, 5, we want to find our input of 0 and our output of 5. So our input of 0 is right here, and our output of 5 is right here. So where those two meet is going to be right there. So there's the point 0, 5. So that would be not on a quadrant at all. That would be on the y-axis. Right? So that's how you do those points. Let's go down and look at the negative, negative. The negative, negative, we need the negative numbers on the input axis. So the negative numbers on the input axis would be right here. So here's the negative, and then we also have a negative for the outputs. So that means it's this quadrant. So that means it's quadrant 3. So anything that has a negative and then a negative for the input and a negative for the output, it's going to be that quadrant. Let's go down to 6, 0. 6, 0. You want to find 6 on the x-axis on the input and an output of 0, and that would be right here. So there's the point 6, 0, and that's not in a quadrant at all. That is on the x-axis. So I'm sure you guys have done this before, so we're just trying to review a little bit, see if I can erase some of this stuff. I'm going to delete that. Don't know how to delete that. Okay. Okay, so let's practice just plotting some points. So if we have 2, 6, again, you want to find 2 on the input, and you want to find 6 on the output, and it's where those two meet. So 2 on the input would be right here. 2 on the input would be right here, and then 6 on the output would be right there, and it's where those two meet. So we have 2 for the input, and we have 6 for the output. So that's the location 2, 6. Right, let's look at letter B, and we could call that, we could write that letter A so we can identify it, right? And then B, we're looking at -3 for the input and -4 for the output. So -3 for the input is right here, and -4 for the output is right here, and it's where those two meet. So -3 and -4. So that's the point -3, -4. It has an input of -3 and an output of -4, and we could label that point B. 0, 4. 0, 4 means you have an input of 0 and you have an output of 4. So that would be located right there. That's the 0.04. And we would label that C. Right, so let's go down and look at, name the coordinates of each point. Let's practice a few of those. So what if I plot this point right here and I call it letter A? What would be the coordinates of letter A? So you want to identify the input first, so you want to go down and see what the input is. So the input is, I'll put it in blue because it is -5, and then you want to go over with your eyes and figure out what the output is. So the output is 6, right? So you have an input of -5, 5, you have an input of 5, and you have an output of 6, and that would be in quadrant 1. Let's look at another point. What if I talk about this location right here? What are the coordinates of that point? We'll call that point B. What are those coordinates? So you want to find out what is the input. So it has an input of -2, and then what is the output? It has an output of -3. So that would be point B. What about point C? Point C has an output of 8, and it doesn't go up or it doesn't go down, it's just sitting on 0, right? And then D. How about D up here? Let's call that letter D. What are the coordinates of that point? Right, so you want to find out what the input is. So the input is -4, and then find out what the output is, +5. So it's -4, 5, right? You always start with the input first and output second. Okay, I'm sure you guys already know all this stuff, but it was just a quick little refresher.